Hey Chatters special guest here with me today. He hasn't been on any of my stuff, but he's been on other SynthMinders stuff, primarily Goda. And I'm gonna let you introduce yourself. Why don't you talk a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your learning journey? Because I know you didn't get started in AI, you just kind of ended up here like me.
I'm Sjoerd from the Netherlands, and basically since ChatGPT came out, I've been working with it, working on it, doing a whole bunch of different things, a whole lot of experimenting. That's with learning Python, but at the same time, just messing around with no-code tools. And I've been lucky enough to do this for people as well, for other people, just build projects. And yeah, I've been messing around for a bit over a year now. And that started with the GPT-3 API, basically, back when the ChatGPT 3.5 that we all know wasn't even available as an API. And yes, I think about November last year, but the year before, I started straight away building no-code tools with the use of Zapier, and shortly after, messing around with other different no-code platforms. And now today we're here, and the tools have become better. The AI models have become better, and it's all super exciting what you can build today.
Yeah, so it's wild. What we're going to get in today is you've been deep in the throes of make.com and making it do things we didn't necessarily know were possible in make.com. For those of you who don't know what make.com is, it's similar to Zapier. It's just an automations tool where you can just hook APIs up to one another to do different things. And you've been in your lab or in your basement or wherever you're doing this work, essentially building a personal assistant agent, like full on, just through make.com and connecting up some APIs. So why don't you tell us a little bit about functionally on the highest level, what does this thing you've built do, and what is your aspirations for where you're moving towards?
So I built this thing out of, like, it started with some simple experimentation. And I think that started 8 months or so ago, where I figured, oh my God, this would be so cool to have as a personal assistant that knows context and can take actions for you. And it started with trying to hook up ChatGPT to Telegram and just have more control, like message it whenever you want, or maybe even have it send messages to you.
Can you just explain what Telegram is in case people
So
don't know?
Telegram is a messaging app. Uh, It's super similar to WhatsApp or Signal. And honestly, it could be built on WhatsApp. It could even be built on Facebook Messenger. It doesn't really matter. It's just one of the different options you can choose from. But yeah, I wanted to build an assistant that could use context and help you out with whatever you need help with. If there's parts of life where you know, "Oh, I'm good at this, I'm not certainly not necessarily good at something else." Like I have trouble like remembering, um, for example, gift ideas or something. Like, what if you could have an AI that has access to some information and can help you with sorting that stuff out, or organizing your life, making it easy to manage your schedule, your calendar, basically anything like a personal assistant like it should do, but then with much less friction, where you can just talk to it in your natural language, mention whatever, and it knows through context and like some language model magic, it can figure out what it needs to do for you. And that was the idea. And I started working on it quite a long time ago, but every time I stranded because of all limitations, either in my own knowledge of what or limitations of what the models could. And now with the Assistance API, so that's ChatGPT 4 or GPT-4 Turbo is what it
Turbo, yeah.
uses. And it's basically, how would I put it? It's like a sort of a system where GPT-4 knows when to take actions, and you give it you give it access to certain actions. So you can tell it how it can reach your calendar, how it can reach your task list, whatever you want it to, how it can do web searching, how it can store notes for you. You tell it how it can do that, and it'll be able to output like a simple bit of JSON, and it knows when to wait for an action, and it knows when to give you a straightforward response.
And sorry, can you explain a little bit of what JSON is? I'm not sure everybody
Oh
knows
yeah,
what that is used for.
JSON is a very straightforward data structure. It's a fairly simple, straightforward um, bit of language that computers can understand and process easily.
I'd say it's just a way to format something, some information and structure that you're trying to communicate to a system, usually an API, for either asking it to give you something or you giving it something to do with. It's just a way
Yeah,
to communicate that
yeah,
easily to a computer, and what most when you're working in with APIs and you're trying to connect the plumbing between different services, JSON is the most common way you do that.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, the Assistants API is built to give JSON depending on the structure, output JSON depending on the structure that you give it. So you can tell it, like, if you want to search my calendar, then you need to give me a window. So like a starting date and an end date between which you get the calendar information. So if I would say I want to check for tomorrow, then what's on my calendar tomorrow, then it'll check like at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, it'll get those start and end dates. And then it gets everything back what is planned for that day with the information you wanted to give. And the structure in which it formats it, that's done in JSON. And yeah, it's basically like one super important aspect, and you don't really need to be able to be experienced with using it. It's actually fairly straightforward. And ChatGPT, like your regular ChatGPT that you can talk with on the OpenAI website, it understands it perfectly. It can format it for you without problems, without any trouble.
Yeah,
It's super
I know I've
straightforward.
done that too, where I'm just like, make this JSON.
Yeah, it's as simple as that. No complicated prompting techniques needed. Just tell it to forward it into JSON and it'll do it for you. I think I did it earlier this morning. Like here, I've got 3 things, just make them into JSON and it output JSON perfectly. I don't think I've ever really written JSON myself, now that I think
Nope,
about it.
definitely not. If you ask me like, how do I write this in JSON, I wouldn't know. All I know is how to ask ChatGPT to do it for me.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, that's basically at the core of communications between the Assistants API and the different tools you can give it. It's like the language that they both speak, that the tools speak and that the Assistants API speaks. So yeah, that's basically at the core of it.
Why don't you show the madness that you've cooked up and we can walk through it sort of function by function?
So it looks really big and there's some somewhat complicated stuff in there, but in the end, it's all just different nodes connected together. The top half it can basically be ignored most of the time, and most of the interesting stuff is going down below this very long line, and it's all in here. But yeah, it basically works. It receives a message from Telegram. So I've built a bot. It's actually made super easy to create your own Telegram bot that you can afterwards hook up to make a message. It's completely free. They provide a really awesome platform and really cool possibilities to work with your bot. But for this is actually somewhat straightforward. But yeah, it checks if it receives a message. Then it checks into the database. Have I seen this conversation before? Yes or no? And that's how it retrieves the right message history. And once that's done, it generates a response. And then depending on if it sees, oh, I need to take an action, it goes into one path. It goes into all the different actions that I've set up right here, like Google Tasks, like receiving it or creating one or deleting one, or in my Google Calendar if it needs to read it, or down here, I've got a request for a web search. And then it periodically checks like, oh, have I received the message? Am I done with this? Yes or no? And then it goes into a different path to send a message, depending on what action it took. And the fun thing is, if I press run once, you can see what's going on. So right now, you see that it's listening. I can send a quick message to it. I can ask it for my calendar for next week. And you won't be able to see me asking it, but now you see it sends a
But we
message.
see it moving through, yeah.
Yeah, you see it moving through, which is really neat. Like right now, it knows that it needs to take an action, so it goes into the branch to the right. it searches for events. Right here, it sends the events back to ChatGPT, whatever it received. And then afterwards, it should go. It's checking, like it's still writing a message. And then it's writing a response back to me. And we wait a little bit longer. There we go. And we've received a message on my Telegram, and it tells me exactly, like for next week, it tells me I've got work and I've got some stuff to do during the weekends. But yeah, it's cool that you
So
can see it
cool.
move through. Like this is something you don't have when you're writing in Python or any other code. You can't really see it move.
Yeah. Yeah, it's much more. I'm a big workflows guy
Mm.
anyway, so I do really like how I much prefer Make to Zapier because of this, is like this more module node type interface.
Yeah.
So tell me what's going on. If you zoom in on the mid bottom, I see you've got some ChatGPT like before it starts getting routed. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what is going on here and how is it recognizing what action it's supposed to take?
Okay. So right here. So let's just go back and walk through it from here. So it receives a message. It stores the message in a variable. And basically, like at the top part is not very interesting. It checks whether it already had a conversation or not and then plugs that back in. But you could skip part if you're just trying to build it for yourself. It wouldn't really matter anyway. But yeah, so it adds the message to the assistant, but adding as a message doesn't really do anything except for adding it to a list. So here, create run is where it gets interesting. Then it tells ChatGPT, you need to do something with this message. You need to respond. And then here with retrieve run, it checks like, oh, what do I need to do with it? So if you go here, you see all the different operations. You see
Mm-hmm.
also like different sizes. Let's go to the first one. And it says in progress. That means ChatGPT is doing something. It's when it's writing a response to you and whenever you're talking, that's what's going on right now. It's writing a response. When that's the case, a note up here, which sends it to somewhere else, it starts checking like, okay, so you're in progress right now, I need to wait. And it waits until it knows, oh, something happened, it changed. It's no longer in progress. And now it sends it somewhere else. Now it goes to the retrieve run again and it checks, okay, so we know something has changed. But let's see what I need to do right now. And we can go in here and see what it wants. This time the status requires action. That means it needs to take an action on one of the few tools that we gave it. It wants to use one of those. And if that's the case, it goes to the right here to one of the many different options that we've got right here.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a bunch of if statements. So if the call that it wants to use is search calendar events, then it goes into this one. It knows how to fill in all the information. So we can look at the input bundles and it says, oh, next week, ChatGPT knows to fill in. That's the 8th of January until the 15th. So that's the start and end date that we filled in. And then you get a whole bunch of information out of it. And the information then gets sent back to the assistant. So he's, okay, I need to take an action. And here's the response of the action. And yeah, it can take a bunch at the same time. So if you say, I want to have, so for every day next week, book in my work hours from 7 to 4. It can do 5 at the same time. And then it sends it all back to the API, to the assistant. And the assistant is, okay, what's the response? Oh, here's a bunch of calendar events that came back. And it turns that into a nice formatted message. And when the status is completed, it knows, oh, I've got a message that's ready to send to the user. Let me send it. And here it sends the message. Output should say, for the coming week, these are the events you've got. Nicely formatted
Mm-hmm.
because, well, ChatGPT understands it well. So that's in like basic terms, if we walk through it on a fairly high level, how it all
Mm-hmm.
works.
Yeah, so pretty much what it's doing is you send a message, sets to, okay, we have a task in progress. And then it's okay, these are the different actions I can take based on what he asked. What is the action I'm supposed to take? And then it filters down to whatever that action is. And then it comes back and it's okay. we've done the thing. Now let's format a message to send back, and then it sends that message back to you after it's done the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, it knows how to format a task. If you think a calculator would be a good example. If I send it like what's 5 plus 5, then it knows how to formulate whatever it needs to send to the calculator. It knows, oh, I need to send 5 plus and 5. If I send it that way to the calculator, I get a response back. Then it reads the response and then relays that back to the user. Yeah, still every time processing it in between. So it won't literally say whatever the output is, but it reads it and then takes it as a prompt and then responds to make it a little nicer.
So I know you said, don't worry about the top stuff, but what? Because that looks like it's the most, like, almost the most complicated. So what is going on up here, and why have you spent time doing that?
I wanted to add a bunch of extra little features. One of them is using the Whisper API. So I can just super quick send a voice message and Whisper takes the audio, turns it into a regular text message, and then it processes it that way. So that way I can just grab my phone out of my pocket, tell it like, oh, I need to do this for next week, schedule this on Tuesday, and then release it and then just put it back in my pocket and then we'll schedule a task for next Tuesday with whatever I send it. I figured that's a really nice way to use it, along with we've got the vision model. Why not use it? If you receive a letter, last week I received a letter that my passport was going to expire in about 4 months. I probably need to set up an appointment to get a new
Get it
one
renewed.
or get it renewed. Exactly. What I can do is quickly take a picture of the letter that I received, send it to Telegram, and give it some context, like or can you put this in my calendar for next week or something that I need to get it renewed? And it does it perfectly without problems. And I wanted to add a bunch of those little extra neat features to make it really nice to use. So say you've got a meeting and you're just jotting notes down on onto paper, just make a picture of the notes and tell it to store it as meeting notes for you. And it'll immediately just upload it as meeting notes. And that's some of what's going on right here. So it recognizes, am I receiving a voice message? Am I receiving an image? Or am I receiving some regular text? And it also checks, like I said earlier, it also checks if this conversation is a new conversation or if it's already ongoing. And if it's ongoing, it just keeps going where it left off. And that way you can have a long history on a like per conversation basis. So if someone else were to talk to this chatbot, it would work perfectly fine for them and it wouldn't get messed up with my own chat history.
Nice.
So that's some of what's going on. And then, so here's the speech to text and the vision. And then I've got this super long note that just passes from left to, but the thing that it's doing is that like here you see update tasks, store notes, retrieve task, create task. Here is where I've got all the little tasks stored. And if I want to create a new one, I've basically made a fairly easy process for myself to add extra tasks. So if we click on update calendar event, this is the JSON and it's all the values that the API needs to send. So the event, the name of the event, whether it's all day or not, what the starting date is, what the end date is. It's all in there. And then it passes that along and gives access to it in the API. It tells it this is an action that you have access to. Here we've got the modify assistant, and here all the functions are in here. There's a long list of them. I think I've got 9 right now, 9 different actions it can take, and those are different actions for creating tasks, editing them, deleting them. Same for calendars and for notes as well. And there's one little OneDrive note here, download a file. And that's basically, I have a bunch of notes in there. And there's one file in which I combine all the notes. And that one is used as a knowledge base in the background. But I've just tried to make it super easy for myself. If I make changes, add extra actions. This one rarely gets used, but when I use it, I just send a message, update knowledge to the chatbot. and it'll update it with the most
Nice.
recent knowledge and all the actions that are in there. So it looks super
So
daunting, but
I was gonna
I have
ask
to.
what I was gonna say, what was the most difficult challenge for you in building this where you were like banging your head against the wall?
So I think the biggest one was getting multiple actions to work. There's some stuff that are standard that Make provides. When I create a node, let's just add one. So Make provides a bunch of standard nodes. And for the OpenAI assistant, they barely provided anything at all. This is the official one. So when I go here, there's a bunch of different options for generating an image. But the only thing that's there for an assistant is to message one. And with just messaging an assistant, there's barely anything you can do. You can't take actions, you can't upload files.
Yeah.
So one user, I don't have his name, but I guess I should probably give you a link to it as well. It's possible for people to make their own apps.
Mm.
And someone was kind enough to build OpenAI that's
A more
much
robust
more
open
able.
AI.
Yeah. So here, create an assistant, retrieve an assistant, modify, list, delete, create. So there's already a whole bunch of options in there.
Oh my God.
And for 90% of all the actions, this was plenty. This was enough. But to receive, to get all the different outputs, because you need to collect, let me take one step back. Here's the provide an output. Oh, if I go, it's jumping all over the place. Let me see where it is.
This is
Yeah,
blowing my
submit tool
mind right
outputs
now.
to run. So it's right here. This endpoint can be used to submit the outputs from the tool calls once they're completed. So basically, if you ask your calendar what's on there and it tells you, it gives you a whole list of what's on the calendar, you have to send that back to the assistant in order for
Mm.
it to be able to like read it, give
Use
you
it.
a response
Yeah.
based on it, which like sounds fairly straightforward. But once you're working with multiple actions and you want to update like for 7 different days at a time, which is for regular usability. If you ask it what's on my task list, can you say, oh, you need to mark 7, 5, and 3 as done. It's just much nicer to use.
Yeah.
But this was difficult to get to work because you have to combine all the different outputs and you have to receive all the different call IDs because every single one goes through it individually. So then you have to combine it. And then after combining it, you need a way to collect all the different call ideas with all the different outputs and send it back. And this was a real head scratcher to get to work, especially since this one was half baked. It could do one at a time, but it wasn't made to do a multiple at a time.
Do multiple, yeah.
Yeah, so I had to build
What
this
was the
myself.
epiphany? Yeah, what was the epiphany moment? How did you figure it
So
out?
I had to dive into the OpenAI documentation and build it myself. And here, everything's in here with the link, the output, and then basically use a bunch of different JSON to combine it with, like here you see the iterator that goes down, and then it's all kinds of different paths and it needs to take, because sometimes you receive a function and it needs to just get one response back and then send it back. But what happens if it needs to go through like the same process twice or 3 times? Sometimes the API makes a mistake and you give it feedback like you made a mistake, you need to try again, and that all happens within the same run. So you send one message, it messes up, it realizes it messes up, um, and then it tries to do the same thing again, and that all needs to work perfectly. Like sometimes you need to send back
Mhm.
multiple outputs, sometimes just one, sometimes you need to send it back and then once more. And that was a big challenge to get to work, but we
Yeah,
got
my
there in the
brain
end.
is hurting thinking about it.
Yeah, so this was definitely one of the biggest challenges. Actually, adding on tasks, like adding on more, it probably takes me like 10, 15 minutes to give it access to, for example, my most recent emails. That part is streamlined right now, and I've got it pretty much down on how to change those. But yeah, that took a while before I got to that point.
What do you got planned next, you mad scientist? What's next on the agenda for plugging stuff into this?
Now that I've basically got the setup down. It's pretty efficient as well. I had to get a little creative with trying to make sure it doesn't use a million different operations, and it gets incredibly pricey with using make.com.
I was gonna ask like how not just make.com, but API calls too, like you have a bunch of calls within this.
Yes, there's not that many API calls towards, like there's a bunch of API calls, I should say, but those are mainly to add a message or check what the run status is. And those
It's
free.
short, yeah.
And those are free. Don't cost they don't cost anything. It costs money once you have to
Nice.
generate stuff. And once
Hmm.
once the assistant has to write out the different calls, that costs money. And so far, it's not too bad. It's a bit hard to put a price on it, but GPT-4 Turbo isn't super pricey to use, as
Yeah.
long as you don't make the context extremely long. So
Hmm.
basically, what I've done is manually every now and then purge all my messages, and I've set up a flow for that too. I can pretty much just message reset chat, and then it instantly it starts over completely clean from scratch.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're looking at it can go up to 100K tokens, which
Yeah.
is imagine 300-page book basically of context.
Yeah.
And if you don't purge those, it'll send 100K tokens every time. And I think you're looking at between $1 and $2 per API call. So imagine $1 to
Hmm.
$2 per message. That's no
And
fun.
it's such a waste too, because it's more context than it could possibly need for whatever you're
Yeah, no,
trying
exactly.
to talk about.
Absolutely. So that's a complete waste. So far, I've basically every now and then just send a message, reset chat, and then it's fine. It works. It's not too pricey. I'm guessing running costs are like if I exclude the cost for make.com, I think if I would send 5 to 10 messages every day, might maybe 10, $20 a month, something along those lines, which I think
Yeah,
is
definitely
fine.
cheaper than paying for an assistant,
Yeah,
custom assistant.
absolutely. Absolutely. It helps that all the other tools that I use are free, except for I use Perplexity for web search since it's
Okay.
fast and the API is easy to use. But
I
that
know
one's
they
super
just
cheap.
got funded too. They just got a huge funding round.
Oh,
I don't know if
nice.
you saw that.
No, I missed it, but I think I started using it right at the end of last year, and I think my first bill was like 5 cents or something.
Mm.
Just whatever. It's worth it. But yeah, no, when it comes to stuff that I have planned, I'm working on something super exciting, and I think the potential is quite insane. I discovered this open source CRM for like personal relationships, and it's basically like a package that's already set together where you can store information about people you have that you're in contact with, like your friends, family, like work colleagues, anything. You can just store it in there at notes. If you have events, then you can upload events and then mention which person was involved and how. It can also be used to set reminders. And it's basically it's I've got it self-hosted right now and it's running, but I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to plug this into the whole system because I think there's some crazy potential here where it knows a lot about a bunch of different things. And yeah, so that's something that I really think is a big next step. If you could relate tasks to different people, that would be insane. Like events as well. Just like the potential there to know so much more, get contact information as well. It's like crazy. There's some issues there with, for example, I can't just give all the data to the API to ChatGPT to OpenAI, especially when it comes to personal information. Like my own calendar,
Hmm.
I don't care. That's my own. I've got one set up just for this, and it works really well. But with personal information, I'll have to be more careful. But I think I could figure out ways to like I have complete control over all the data. It's also self-hosted, and I could probably manage some way in how I can obscure some of the information that I send to OpenAI and still get the data out of it that I want. But yeah, I think that's the big next step now that I've got all the basics down.
Yeah, essentially a relational database you can use. So for that, are you imagining, I'm sure it's a combo, but is it just filling out that information based on your chats with it, or are you filling out that information somewhere else and it's just accessing that database, or both?
Both, absolutely both. What I noticed right now, I can tell it like, hey, we're going to work on a node together. And I want you to just ask me questions, work together with me. And once we've fleshed out the idea, once you've got enough context, then let's store it. And I think this could work the same way, where you can just have a chat, go back and forth. And once it's ready, tell it to, okay, now you can store this information. Or you can just send a quick voice message. Hey, I just had a chat with so-and-so. It was about this and that. Please store it. And then you know, oh, I've got a meeting again with this person. You can just ask, hey, what did we talk about last time?
Mhm.
And it'll be able to conjure it up. So it's definitely both. And I think that's also where I want to make this as frictionless as possible. And I don't want to dive into 7 different platforms and use them. I basically want my
Software
assistant to
bloat.
use it for me.
Yeah, 100% agree. I think that is definitely the way things are going, where you have the conductor, as I call it, the orchestrator, as others call it, where you're just interacting with this one thing and it's the thing interacting with all the different things.
Yeah, that's the dream. That's the whole idea.
That's what we're working towards.
Yeah, pretty much. Um, pretty. Right now, the assistance API was a big step up towards that goal, and I'm definitely going to do some experiments and see how far I can get with more open source models or just different models we can access. But right now, the assistance API with the ability for it to just always adhere to the structure of the different actions, like it works like 9 out of 10 times with the different actions. And then if you have it set up properly right here, create a calendar event and you see the little weird lines here to a different set variable. It's basically if it gets an error back from the create an event, it sends the error back to the output. And that way ChatGPT knows it made a mistake and it can try again with the
Mhm.
context of that
Which
error.
it does. If you're just using ChatGPT, it'll often be like, this didn't work. I made a mistake. Let's try this.
Exactly. And you basically automate the process by telling it, like automatically telling it when it knows, oh, I need to take an action again. And it'll try again,
Mhm.
but now knowing that
Yeah.
the error that it made. And this is something that basically it ups the success rate to 98, 99%. It almost never makes a mistake anymore, which is super neat. And that's
Yeah.
something that I really hope that other models that you could possibly run on your own system could achieve too. But that's
Oh,
something
100%. I feel like you could pretty easily get a 7 billion parameter model to do most of this, because a lot of the in-betweens here, they're not complex. They're fairly rote processes. So it feels like it's definitely possible.
yeah, it should be, but I think it's still going to be, it's a bit of a challenge to hook it all up together. Just the
Mhm.
assistance API just made it so much easier. And I think like it's still in beta and it'll get better. And I'm super excited for what it will be able to do. But yeah, there's just a ton of potential there. And I really want to see if you could get with your like a locally running assistant, if it could get even remotely close to this quality, that would already be amazing because then you could just be completely careless about the level of
The
privacy.
privacy.
Yeah. Then you don't have to worry about sending like important information from other people.
Mhm.
It's just super neatly all in your own system.
And at some point too, I think we're going to get to the point where it's going to be super easy for you to train your own model or fine tune an existing model on this process essentially. And it'll run 100% of the time because it's like literally trained specifically for this purpose. So we're not there yet, obviously,
No,
but I think that's the direction we're moving towards, is costs come down and we start to see this new wave of AI focused chips coming out, like specifically made for this purpose.
right. Yeah, no, that's incredibly exciting. And I'm building stuff and just experimenting all the time. And I have no problems like working on a project, ditching it because it doesn't work well, and then coming back to it with either having some extra skills myself, or having
The
the
T has just
yeah,
moved
the
up a
technology.
bit.
Exactly. So if ChatGPT, if GPT-4 gets better, if the Assistance API comes out, then I'll just start messing around with it straight away and see how far I can get. And it's perfectly fine if it doesn't work. Like I shared earlier, I said 8 months ago or something, I made like a super bare bones version of this and used Google Sheets as message history. So I just told it like, oh, a message comes in, store it in Google Sheets, and then retrieve it from Google Sheets again to build up the history again. It was super messy, gave errors all the time, but it was the start of it, and it allowed me to learn a whole bunch. And I think that without that experimentation, I wouldn't have been able to build this either.
Yeah, I 1000% agree. And I think one of the most fabulous things about this generative AI is it reduces the barrier to starting and failing at something.
Mm,
Because for one, it separates your identity from the failure because it's no, it's the technology's failing. I'm not failing. But also, you can just iterate and prototype immediately. And like you said, if you hit a wall, you've still learned where that wall is and why that wall is there.
yes.
And then when the technology moves forward, you're like, oh, wait, this is no longer a barrier anymore. Let me go back to what I was doing and use this new tool I've discovered or that was invented to get over that barrier. And you just keep building on that.
Exactly. And I want to add on to that, that the evolution of technology, make.com isn't necessarily like revolutionary per se. Same can be said for Zapier. But these platforms do make it like a whole lot easier for someone like me who doesn't have a very technical background to just only have to worry about the building the cool stuff. So I don't have to set up a server, write code myself, deal with all kinds of different, worry about all kinds of different things like the security of the different modules. Like I remember trying to set up authentication to have access to my Gmail using Python. And it was just like a complete headache and a
Nope.
total
Yeah.
mess to do it. And here it takes me about 30 seconds to set to get access to
Yeah.
it. Basically, these people have figured out a whole bunch, and that just allows me to work on the cool stuff, which makes it so much more accessible to build automations that are suited perfectly for me. Uh, and that's something I've been realizing it more and more the past year. And you still need to study. You need to work a bit on, like for this, I had to dive into Make's own courses, and I've completed like a large chunk of them. And I think that was definitely a must to get this to work. I couldn't have built this without the knowledge I got from those courses. So it still definitely takes some work, but I think that's, I would say, like maybe 10 hours of studying.
Yeah.
And
But it's different though, because it's to me, I go down the deep rabbit hole too when I hit a wall, as we said, because I'm like intrinsically motivated to figure out how to get through or around that wall because it's I'm trying to do this cool thing. I'm working on this cool project. I've hit a snag. Okay, how do I solve this problem? And then when you solve the problem, you're like, damn, I'm good. Good. Because you
yes,
got
yes,
around that
yes.
issue and you did it by like essentially teaching yourself how to do something you didn't know how to do before. And that feels really good.
No, definitely. And ChatGPT is like a really great troubleshooter as well.
Yeah. Especially now with like vision, where you can just take a little snapshot, being like, I got this error. This is what it looks like. And walk me through what I can do.
Yes. Last time I had a chat with Goda, I realized you could just copy and paste a note. So if I copy this, I knew you could copy and paste a note. Like that's super straightforward. You can select one, Control C, Control V, and it's done. Um, but what's super cool is that you can paste that outside of make.com as well. And then you realize
Mhm.
it's just a bunch of JSON. And what I did was, so here the modify assistant one, it's gotten big. It's big. It's long. There's
Yeah. Oh my
It's
God.
also super straightforward, like to be clear. So it's like update function 8 description, update function 9 description, update function
Yeah.
10 description. So I've made sure it's as easy as possible, and I can copy and paste this, toss it into the code interpreter, and tell it to add another function.
Mm-hmm.
And that way it adds the next one. So you get update function 10 name, update function 10 description, update function 10. I don't have to fill it in manually. It just does it for me,
Mm-hmm.
which is super neat. That combined with copy and pasting this in there as well. Like, it's fun when you discover those little
Hacks.
the little hacks, the little tricks that basically I've never heard anyone talk about it before, but it's the code interpreter knows how to, like, it can write code. ChatGPT itself can interpret JSON perfectly. It's
Mm-hmm.
so I figured, oh, if I can copy and paste this, then I can copy and paste it into ChatGPT and have it edited for me. With maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of added context, but yeah, those little tricks are like super, super cool to find. And yeah, that's what makes it like a 10-15 minute process to add another action to the whole assistant, is basically those little tricks, the little hacks.
Yes.
Yeah, where it's like a combination of a tool powered by ChatGPT and having ChatGPT as like a companion who can look over your shoulder and tell you like, oh, maybe you should look here.
Help you troubleshoot.
Yeah, exactly. And that combination is like really powerful and allows people like me to build some cool assistants. Let's just try it out and talk to it. Can you create on my task list that I need to work on my newsletter to explain how my AI assistant works? Stands it. See. Yes. Hey, what's on my to-do list? I could just type messages, but I can use it this way as well.
Yeah.
You see here, it calls a function. Takes a
If it
moment.
were me, I'd have it say something funny. Whatever it was called.
Yeah, no, function call is just a placeholder right now. I can maybe turn it into something more. Let's see where it is. Oh, it's checking. It's super fun that you can see in the background what's going on with the
Yeah, where it
assistant,
is
where
in
it
the
is.
process.
Right, so it listed a bunch
Uh,
of tasks that I've set up. Oh, it's all in Dutch.
Uh-oh,
Okay.
you're overdue on a few things, man. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I know.
Gotta catch up.
So can you mark the Calendly task as done? I keep opening up the but no, yeah, I can just talk to it super fast. And that's like a very neat thing, is that I like to be able to just open it up, talk to it, put it back, and I know it's working
Yeah,
in the background.
100% agree.
I can go back and forth like you do with regular ChatGPT, but I think ChatGPT does that pretty fine. But like a few days ago, I was setting up something like a piece of software, trying to get it to run, and I just every now and then I put in a link, I wrote down some notes, like in the chat box here, and then I told it to store it as a note, and it just stores it as a note, and in my Obsidian I can see it all, what's going on. So it says the task to add Calendly to the assistant, which, I mean, it actually isn't completed, but I just as an example. But yeah, I can ask it what's on my calendar, and I can just send it regular messages as well. Also, one thing that I really want to do as a next step is allow it to send messages back to me just throughout the day for whatever reason.
Like what kind of messages? Just
Hey, a
like
reminder to
personal encouragements or
something like,
reminders
no,
and stuff.
imagine if you hook it up to your email and then whenever something important comes in, it tells you, or like maybe like a daily digest or something in the morning. You receive a message like, hey, this is what happened when you were asleep. Something along those lines. So basically want to take away as many things like different apps you need to check, different websites you need to browse through. Just make it like a one-stop shop for everything, like all the important stuff. Like everything might be a bit, of course, there's still going to be some apps that you want to use for whatever reason, but just for your day to day, this could be pretty amazing. Right now, where it is, like I use it daily. Questions like that, am I free today to work on cool stuff? I can just ask it, and it's nice. It works really well.
No, you're overdue on all of your tasks.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add on to the pile of different tasks, but right now it's already, yeah, so it lists different tasks that I have on my calendar. you've got some time between regular work and a chat with Joe Rosenbaum. Like, here we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, so much potential. But right now, what it's already able to do is like super helpful. Just like, I reached a bit of an inflection point. This is something I can use in my day to day. And that hasn't always been the case. Sometimes you
Yeah.
build something and then over time you forget about it because it's not really that useful.
Mhm.
This time I think I've got something really cool.
Yeah, and it bootstraps to the next level too, because now you're interacting with your life through natural language rather than having to flip around and be scattered. It just now allows you a next level of organization and ability to continue to experiment and improve on your own like effectiveness and efficiencies, which has hopefully exponential effects for you in terms of whatever you're trying to accomplish.
I'm not super interested in being like the productivity, insane productivity stuff. I just want to make it as easy to use as possible. It's not so much to how do I put this? It's more just a really useful tool for my day to day to free up time to think about more fun stuff and not necessarily to be productive 100% of the time.
I agree.
Yeah,
Go
if this
ahead.
leaves free time to do fun stuff, to mess around, to play around, then that's great. That's amazing. Then
Yeah, I always think about it as the aspiration for me is how do I use this stuff to give me more time to work on the things that I'm most interested in or I'm most intrinsically motivated to do, to be creative. And I'd say Obsidian for me has been huge with that. And as I copy and paste what you've done here, I'm really excited to like, how do I free up more of my time to do more of the things I enjoy doing and less the rigmarole, mundane stuff I don't like doing.
yeah, no, of course. I'm with you absolutely. So far, note taking, I've done I think a dozen attempts and nothing really stuck. Mm. But it's super cool that I can just talk into this really quick and then have it store a note for me and
Mhm.
correctly tag it into different categories that I've listed in the initial prompt inside of the assistant.
Mm.
And that's really nice. I think the this way of communicating with the assistant, just being able to hold the microphone button down and then just talk into it, just send a quick message is for me it makes a big difference. I thought the voice one was cool, but sometimes I just need to think for a second and I don't want to have it. I feel like there's a
Yeah, there's like
pressure.
urgency.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
feel like
I
there's a
totally
pressure,
agree.
and then suddenly it picks up a tiny bit of noise and it starts talking back. No, wait, just shut up.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah, and yeah, I think someone else made like a fairly similar demo a little while ago, and it was funny that they used a similar example. So I want to do like the web search and how it works, and the question was what's going on with Sam Altman, like a good example of something super recent. That's yeah, something
Yeah,
super recent. That's a great example of like, just a web search.
yeah, because I know that the Assistance API doesn't actually have web browsing as part of the inbuilt functionality. So you have to hack it together.
I always say please to our assistants. It's
Yes,
important.
always got to be nice.
Oh, so this is a different message than I expected.
It is more recent, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But no, that's also a good
I
example
wonder
that
if
it
that's
actually.
true.
Yeah, I wonder if it's actually. Yeah, no, it's still in the large language model that can make mistakes. But yeah, no,
Let's let's see. Sam, it's been yeah. This is true. It pulled from an article that was released today.
nice. So perfect example. Nice. No, but this
Yeah.
uses perplexity, which I like this way more than just the regular web browsing. Their
Yeah, I'll
API
have
is
to
nice
try it
and
out.
fast. Oh, it's one of my favorite AI tools, to be honest.
Yeah, why is that?
It's basically almost completely replaced all of my Google searches.
Google.
It's fast. That's one important thing. Lists the sources like really nicely. And you can just keep asking questions when something's unclear. For example, I was looking into like white labeling some open source stuff, and it's much easier to ask a bit more complicated, in-depth questions to Perplexity AI than it is to Google around, search for the right information. It just does it for you by considering like the first 10 search
Hmm.
results. And especially with the Copilot, it does 3 different searches at once and grabs all the information, something you would do yourself normally, and then gives you a neatly organized, nicely written answer to whatever question you ask.
I'll have to check it out. Can you prompt it to give the response in a certain format? Because right now, like for example, in Obsidian, when I'm doing research, I have a GPT that will output essentially like a little wiki article on whatever topic I'm interested in, but in Markdown with the backlinks and tags so that I can very easily get that
So
into the vault.
this is something that was actually a little bit disappointed, as in that the API doesn't support like sources. And
Mm,
for this assistant, it's fine. When I
yeah.
want to do a quick search on something, I can just ask and then it'll come back. It's perfectly okay. But I think that, yeah, so that doesn't support sources, but their own, like when you just go to perplexity.ai, they do mention sources and there's some room for prompting, but I haven't really experimented using different markdown or having it in JSON or something.
Hmm.
But I think it'd be awesome if they would like output markdown or JSON with sources mentioned. That would be super cool.
Hmm.
But I think, yeah, their API still, it's nice. It's very fast. So they've built their own 7B model, but you can also use the Mistral 7B model.
Hmm.
And it's ridiculous. It's about just as fast as you would expect, like GPT 3.5 to give you an answer. And this
Hmm.
one includes web search as well. So it's impressive. But yeah, let's see. I actually made a small mistake. I should have, for the images, I set the quality to low and it's like super low. I can't read anything from a document, so I need to set it to high, but that's like a click and it's done. But that's okay. Just, there's my notes. Just do a super quick extra one. And now it stores into my Obsidian.
So nice.
And it's not super duper fast, but that's just a beautiful name.
Sam Altman concerns.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Thanks again for sharing. And let's get this out to the world, and hopefully people can start building their own personal assistants.
Yeah, I think in time I want to make this one accessible to people as well, but I haven't really figured out how I'm going to pull this off.
Yeah.
And like, I can't pay for everyone to use this.
No, it would have to be like either a product, or you're just like giving away the blueprint and how you plug in your own APIs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if I want got the book ready, but I'm a bit in doubt whether I want to share it or not. It's we'll see. I still need to develop it a bit more. And I think that once I've got the CRM, the relationship manager in there, I think that will be like a big step, and then we'll see what I do, what I'll make of it afterwards.
Cool. I'll catch you later.